who use our product at the end client. And I know that this community has lots of partners and ISV. So I think this session will speak to you at length. And if you like talking about Power Platform, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. That's pretty much the only thing I talk about. Other thing that is interesting, why am I talking about EUC in the financial sector, is that right now I'm part of the global black belt team in Europe, Middle East, and Africa. So I cover like all industries. But at the end of this month, I'm moving back to my home country of Canada, where I'm going to be part of the Microsoft team over there as well, but dedicated on the financial sector for everything Dynamics and Power Platform as well. So EUC will pretty much be my new morning cereal. So, but for those of you who just like type in Google, what is EUC, you probably find two different answers. And let's go like a quick test today. What is EUC? Is it an electric unicycle, which is a EUC, or it is actually end user computing that refers to system no programmers can create working applications? Of course, the answer is B. EUC is just a fancier name for shadow IT, but in the legal industry, it's kind of a shadow IT category of stuff that you don't want to sweep under the carpet, because it is a highly regulated industry, and those things that you don't know about might come back and give you some challenges down the road. And those challenges, they cover many different areas. First of all, what's kind of the typology of EUC we see the most often? In large organization, and I'm talking like the top 50 banks, their main problem with shadow IT or EUC is Microsoft Excel spreadsheets. It comes at no surprise. This is the most pervasive form of EUC in banking today. And the problem with Excel is that 90% of all the spreadsheets that go above 150 lines, they will have problems. They will have errors. And only about half of the very skilled people can actually detect those errors in an Excel spreadsheet. So think about it. If your bank runs an Excel, as you're about to see in a second, and every Excel spreadsheet has more than 150 rows, which is fairly common, and people can't spot any problem, then it gives you problem making prediction at the end of the year on your forecasts, and also might have some problem with regulations. And in the banking industry, again, as it is regulated, the financial institution, they have to put that as a column in their risk management at the end of the year. And that risk that they have to manage in large organization, it's about 285 million per year per institution. So this is not a small problem. So if we take only the 50 top financial institution on the planet, that risk alone every year is 12 billion. That's a lot of money. So when these companies see that value at risk being on their, at the end of the year, potential problems, then their insurance costs, they get more expensive, and they have more people with eyes on them to make sure that they comply to regulations. So when you look at modern banking today, this is pretty much how it looks. So you might have a very fancy mobile banking app that does all the things that you want, from a daily account to even investment. And then some banks will put in place very fancy blockchains, and then they will have their legacy branch application when you show up and they have your customer account. But at the end of the day, that kind of house of cards is built on Excel spreadsheet that might not even be supported anymore if they have older versions, which is oftentimes the case. And these spreadsheets, they live on Janice and accounting laptop, or they live on one of your investment banker laptop, and that's a huge risk. So all that house of card in those big banks, sometimes it does really is just at the brink of collapsing on those Excel spreadsheets. And banks know that, and regulators, they know that. And ultimately, there's a lot of banks today that will use RPA to try to, scotch tape this in a little more stable manner, but it doesn't do everything all the time, although it does help. So when we think about, hey, what kind of Excel spreadsheet can make this company at risk? Well, you can have your entire loan approval formula. You would think it relies on super advanced algorithm but in many cases, it's just like an Excel spreadsheet that lives with formulas and macros on your bank director's laptop. The risk assessment matrix that they have. So they do manage their risk problem with an Excel spreadsheet, and the risk of those information leaking out of the organization or being false in a few numbers when you add up in billions of dollars of cash movement every year, those risks are just humongous. And so this is a short list of the common EUCs we see with the largest banks, but also in smaller banks. But I would say EUC, even like for people at Microsoft, where we combine sales numbers from so many different departments, we have spreadsheets every year that we need to combine and then publish our results to our shareholders. There's a lot of that used to live in Excel. We had to make the extra effort to convert that into a much more scalable and stable solution. But we're a tech company. We're able to do that. But not every bank is as agile with technology as a company like Microsoft. So EUC is not just like a dream. The problems that can be there, they are really highly dangerous and also very relevant today. As a Canadian, it sucked to be living in Quebec 2 years ago because most people in Quebec are clients of a big bank there called Le Mouvement Desjardins. Awesome bank, awesome people, but they had a person who had access to 7 million records of individual with social security numbers, account numbers, date of birth, all the PII nightmare you can think of, was able to exfiltrate and sell that data to other companies. And all of that was on Excel spreadsheets. And the thing is, it's not that he had direct access to a database and then just do exports. The database was kind of safe, but because the database was not well connected with the tools they kind of use every day, a ton of people were able to do downloads of the My Clients and stuff like that to make their daily lives easier. But then when you aggregate all of those Excel spreadsheets across all your colleagues that have them on your PC or on their PC, then that amount of information is a lot. And the same year that this problem occurred, where it was 9.7 million Canadian, but 7 million people from Quebec, the same year that that thing happened, we had Equifax, who had hundreds of millions of information. So Equifax, if you're European, you don't know them maybe, but if you live in North America, they're the one providing a credit score about you. So whenever you want to buy a house or rent a car, they hold all that data. So the same year, about in the same month, both Equifax and Desjardins were massive data leaks. And it was a very painful time if you were living in Quebec, because the company that was supposed to protect your data the most, both of them could not provide that service. But then when you look at companies like Citigroup, they had to pay a fine of 400 million, plus the government put like lots of people to put highs on all their processes internally because they were not able to manage their EUCs and other processes around risk management properly, accordingly. So 400 million fine for not being able to replace your bad processes and bad tools, that stings a lot for a company even as big as Citibank. And something similar with Credit Suisse, and it was just like the settlement happened about 2-3 days ago, where they were fined 350 million pounds. That is a lot of Canadian money, by the way, because they were able to manipulate information they have with the government and some private organization in the Mozambique. And they were able to hide all of that information on EUC stored in computers and everything. And even then, when the bank tried to do a internal investigation, because the data was not classified properly, was living on Excel and on somebody's mobile, they were not able to track and address the problem in the right way. So EUC not only is a risk for penetration from the exterior from a bad person, but also you cannot rely on every employee all the time, because some of them might be just incompetent. Some of them might have nefarious motivations that put your company, your brand, and ultimately lots of people's lives at risk. So this is not a small problem. and it's not a problem that is, hidden behind like potential. It actually happens, and we'll see more and more of that in the coming years. So those Excel spreadsheets, it's not a small task to tackle. When we look at the biggest bank we work with, there's tens of thousands of EUCs in every financial institution. Those banks have hundreds of thousands of people. We can see up to 20 to 30,000 EUCs that we've documented, but that's only the tip of the iceberg. There's many of those EUCs in forms of Excel spreadsheets or access databases or other means that are left unaccounted for. And this is a big problem, and we need to track that. So where do we start? The first thing is not necessarily a Power Platform or a Dynamics thing. You need to secure your data sources and your user accounts. This is undeniable. Any cybersecurity expert will say the same thing. This is not the purpose of this meeting, but it is important that this is the real step one that needs to be done. Either you're a part of the organization or you're working with a financial institution, this is the step one. But then, what do we do next? It's time to find them. Let's go hunting. Let's find those EUCs. Let's rely a little bit also on people goodwill to report EUCs when they have some. But sometimes they don't even know what an EUC is. So we need to find ways to find and track and document them. Once we've done that, well, we need to mitigate the problem. There are still today some of those spreadsheets that are not easily replaceable by an algorithm or by a database or something else. Investment banking, when they do those big merger and acquisition calculation, they use Excel all the time. And it's kind of hard to replace because they want the power of having it on their computer while they're on the plane, going to a client. They will trigger different models before the meeting. But when you think of the level of sensitivity of the information that is on an M&A report, geez, you don't want that to go into the wrong people's hand. You don't want anybody to have that on a USB stick, right? So you need to mitigate those. You can probably mitigate 70 to 80% of them, but there's always going to be a 20% that you know exists that you're going to have all your eyes on it, but you might not be able to replace 100%. But then once it's mitigated, you need to manage what you've changed and also make sure that people don't go around that EUC mitigation process that you've put in place. So you need to be able to pretty much keep that circle alive between finding, mitigating, and managing, and that's super important. So how can you get started with that? Functionally speaking, the Power Platform and the Microsoft Cloud probably has the best toolbox to address this. We did not build like a off-the-shelf solution to manage that because there's lots of variation in every organization. However, all the tools are there for you. Again, if you work in one of those institutions or if you work as a partner with those institutions, we provide the entire tool set to help you do that. So let's start with the first step. How do you identify those EUCs? Well, there's many ways of doing this. The first one is to detect this through AI. So you don't have to rely on people's goodwill or time to report that. So you can use the Office graph. You can use some Excel add-in or a companion app that can work on the desktop, say, hey, you open a spreadsheet and we can see that you have some PII in it. So then take action. Even if it works in the offline mode, there are ways that you can monitor certain action on a desktop using, for instance, robotic process automation can be one of them as well. So you can detect through the graph if everything is online, but we know not every bank is fully online. And then you can have a companion, either in Excel itself or a companion app on the desktop to do that. But then in many cases, you will have to send out a survey to your employees every year, every quarter, every month, whatever is the frequency you prefer. Those tools will allow people to declare, hey, I have X amount of spreadsheets I use every day. This is the level of sensitivity we would have in there. This is what I do. So at least I can report that and you can consolidate the information and look at the size of the risk. You can do forms. You can do a Power App that people will use. You can do a portal. You can use a chatbot within Teams. Say, hey, I see you open X amount of spreadsheet last month based on the graph information that we have. Can you tell me a little more about it? So you can build that with Power Virtual Agent and use the prompts that we have in Teams to do that. And then the one thing that we saw a couple of hours ago, if you're online, absolutely enable Microsoft Information Protection auto labeling. This is kind of the step one in those things if you've deployed that. We know not every organization has deployed that. There are some capabilities that are fairly new. The scope is around mostly like Exchange and SharePoint and OneDrive. There's going to be more and more capabilities on the locations of MIP. But at least, I mean, email, SharePoint, and OneDrive, you cover already a whole bunch of things except what's on the desktop. But this is where the next phase of cataloging is becoming important. You have to be able to have a risk assessment. You can build a risk matrix with Power BI. You want to use manual labeling with MIP. You might flag those in your app or your process to keep as is for obvious business reasons sometimes. But there's a moment where you need to be able to tell your people, this file, although I'm going to allow you to have it, it's okay. You can leave it on your computer, but you have to move it on the cloud. You can still use the file, but instead of being saved on your drive or on a USB stick, it needs to be on the OneDrive or SharePoint, and then we need to apply a proper MIP labeling on it. So it does not disrupt their work too much, but at least the original file is in the cloud. And as an IT manager, you can actually monitor and track what happens with that file and the people who have access to it. And finally, you will eventually find a few of those spreadsheets that you will flag to replace. And all the rest, like documenting those things, it's a project. At that point in time, you've all done IT projects around the Power Platform. You have the user stories, you have screenshots. You might want to use new Power Platform capabilities like the Process Advisor tool that will offer your end users the capability to record their steps and see how they use the tool. And then you can have a good idea on how you can replace that with an automation or with an app or something else. And then there's feature capabilities, your backlog and everything. This is just like a project that the Center of Excellence would manage most of the time. But there are some of those tools that are not necessarily all big projects. And again, if there's 25,000, 30,000 EUCs in a bank, there's no way in the world you're going to be able to solve all of those problems in 1 year. So you will have to delegate part of that to citizen development, partners, and also maybe your COE or your development team. There's no way that's going to be done by your entire development team in a year. No way. So by redesigning that, you can have certain types of apps that are best suited for, default environment and SharePoint and do that there instead of Excel. Some other more complex might require some SQL, some Azure Synapse, some PureView, or whatever type of advanced tooling and or governance tools you need to do because the data is across the company. That's important to do as well. But that brings me back to the point I told you before. You will only be able to allow people to build solution at the scale you need if your data is secured and if the user accounts are secured. So think of that very strong and hard before you engage in those processes of mitigation. So then you got to redesign, you got to build by user, COE partner, you're going to buy some prepackaged solution. VeryPark and HCL, they offer lots of stuff to carry certain types of processes like the know your customers and stuff like that were very much Excel driven until today, but there are certain of those partners that are there. However, there's not a single partner solution that tackles all the problems that we've identified in the first place. And then you're going to deploy that. You have your deployment methodology. And as we heard in the previous session, you can do that manually by importing and exporting solution. You can use Azure DevOps or GitHub to deploy that. And then you're going to have the next part. And I would say with EUC, oftentimes people will think, oh, I've mitigated, I'm done, my job is okay, I can track the next project. It's not true. You need to continuously monitor the use of the tool that you've created that mitigate that. And most importantly, all the tools that you did not replace. So you need to have this part of the governance where monitoring of that using Power BI, the graph, different tools that you can build are put in place. And then eventually, well, everything evolves, so you need to make those apps evolve. And this is where the Power Platform has also added functionality. If it's built with tools that are replicable and easily distributable to all people, it's easier to make those apps evolve. So that process alone might be the solution that you want to build from end to end. Or you might choose to build capabilities in some of those columns to solve a very smaller scope problem. But typically in large organization about risk management and EUC, you want to have some variation of this entire process. Either it runs on Microsoft Power Platform or on Jira or on ServiceNow, doesn't matter, but at least the process is there. And if you don't have such a comprehensive, sophisticated process, I encourage you strongly to build it either internally or as a solution that you can then redistribute and sell to your banking clients. Now, what parts of the Power Platform kind of work to enable that? We kind of touched a bit of those, and I just want to call some of them by name. When you move your data, you will need to find that data somewhere, and it's going to reside in your productivity suite, like in your Google Docs or your Office 365, SharePoint list, emails. You're going to have data there that you will need to identify, connect to, and track. But it's the same thing with your core business data, your ERP and SAP or Dynamics CRM solution, any cloud services that you might want to use for storage like Box, Dropbox, or OneDrive. You want to be able to connect to all of those things. But there's still a whole lot of EUC data or data that needs to transit that still live on premises. So you need to connect to that as well. Some of it will live in the cloud in modern data services like Dataverse or a PostgreSQL. And then your organization might use different types of solution. If we mentioned a few of them, like the Jira, the ServiceNow, but if they do sales, maybe you have Salesforce or Marketo if you do marketing. All of those systems have PII that people sometimes can export and then put in a spreadsheet. So you need to be able to track the data flows across all of that. But also you will probably build certain automation from robotic process automation, digital process automation that uses APIs to those 500 connectors, but also can use custom APIs and stuff like that. Building some AI, so you want to be able to recognize the information in an unstructured document to say, hey, is that a risk or is that not a risk? So you can do that with AI Builder, for example. But then you will need some approvals in some business process management to control your process of EUC finding, mitigating, and monitoring. And ultimately, you will be able to find or distribute or collaborate around your EUC processes where people work using multiple user experiences on mobile application to approve or reject your EUC request or just to log a new EUC declaration. More sophisticated business application, secured web portal. Mixed reality doesn't really apply to EUC. This is kind of a generic Power Platform slides. But then chatbots can also prompt when we see you using EUC somewhere. And then again, everything that is Power BI, working around Teams, your ERP, your CRM. So the tools can be there to be able to label some of the problems. So we're going to see more and more interaction between Microsoft Information Protection and the Power Platform. So then you will at time be able to say, hey, that RFP that is stored in Dynamics has a label on it now. And then every other collaboration tool that you use. And then when you look at all the out-of-the-box capabilities that this broader set of feature offers you, it's actually pretty cool. You have native connectors to all of those things to find stuff, to help you build stuff, to help you manage those EUC that you found. So in terms of toolbox to be able to do that, it's great. But on top of that, again, Microsoft Information Protection, it's a huge deal. If you can build custom algorithms on the Azure platform to be able to do advanced recognition, do it. All of those things can trickle down into your Power Platform system to not only allow you to build them, but to manage them at scale. All right. So Now that we have a plan, and I hope that you have some inspiration to say, I'm a partner or I work in a bank. I want to build something. Where do I start? If you want to build solutions and you're part of the problem, but you now want to be part of the solution, just go to Power Platform and start building, start documenting, start building Microsoft Forms to send to your employees to say, hey, are you using EUC? What do you use them for? Bring that back into a CDS or SharePoint list. I would recommend Dataverse for that is probably the best solution in terms of security and scalability. Start building your solution today. And if it's only for your organization, you want to keep it for yourself, it's fine. But if you are an MVP, if you are a partner, an ISV, we call them independent solution vendors, there are many parts of that big process that you can build either as a whole or in smaller chunks that you can distribute. Because we know that the risk for larger organization is there. There's a tremendous market opportunity for you to be able to monetize what you do because you're going to find some similarities. These are all organizations in the same industry. And then you will be able to probably not only sell them a solution to find or mitigate, but they won't be able to build everything themselves. So as a partner, you'll be able to build professional services to create mitigated solution on the bigger things. And you might be there for a long period of time because those clients, they know that problem exists. They have a good idea on what's their value at risk, but they know they can't do it alone. So they have to prepare funds or budget to mitigate those things because the longer they wait, the closer they get from a problem or from a fine from the regulator. And there are a few new things if you're not familiar with AppSource. So AppSource is the way to distribute your app. Think of a Google Store or App Store, but it works for Power Platform and Dynamics, but you can also sell your services. But once you have published and distributed a package that you created, you can monitor the usage of those package and learn. And also there's new way to bill your end client through ISV Studio. So you don't have to create a new contract up front that is complicated and have salespeople. If you're able to build a solution that can be easily installed and used, you can have multiple ways of billing directly through ISV Studio. So that makes the whole process much faster. So again, if you want to get started and build for your own bank or financial institution, that's great. If you're a partner looking at distributing and monetizing it, we have also solutions for you. So I want to take a few minutes here just to look at the questions. Let me just switch here on the chat. And Raz, if you think I missed something big, just let me know. All right. So I have a question from Sumit Kumar. Kim, for these end clients with banking, do you see Power Platform as a solution? Traditionally, I've used Dynamics and seen banks like Barclays, Metrobank, and CT. So Dynamics 365 is a tool for marketing, sales, customer service, and it also has like a bunch of insights feature. It will certainly be part of a solution at one point. So if you say, hey, I want to secure, I want to be able to have a pipeline of my sales, and I want my sales consultant or my banking advisor, my personal financial advisors to have access to data about their clients, of course, they should use Dynamics all the time. They should not have that data pulled out of a mainframe on Excel spreadsheets and kind of a clunky third-party app to do contact management. They should absolutely use Dynamics 365 to manage that. But not every EUC processes are CRM friendly. If you try to put that into the CRM, you will have to do heavy customization that sometimes is not necessarily best suited for. Let's say if you want to do a loan approval request or very comprehensive KYC process that involves multiple stage, sometimes it's best if it lives outside of the CRM for that part of the process to then just loop back in with a decision. So then you have less impact on performance. And if there's multiple humans in the loop for that approval process, they don't all need Dynamics 365 licenses. They might only need a Power Apps or Power Automate license. So the CRM is absolutely one part of the solution, but then many other things will be part of the solution as well. But again, I believe that the Power Platform is probably the best tool to implement a EUC management process, out of which solution might be built on different platforms. Again, the Microsoft business applications are great for that, but it might not be the only thing you use. But at least finding, monitoring, and managing can all be done with the Power Platform. So I hope, Sumit, that answers your question. And one thing, and if I add to that, Sumit, one thing you absolutely want to block. There's a feature in Dynamics which is enabled by default that allows you to export to Excel spreadsheet to your desktop. Block that. You don't want your sellers in the banking industry to be able to create more EUCs, even if you install CRM. So make sure that the export to Excel is limited only to those who absolutely need it. Don't let that work with other people. And I think, Sumit, you know what I'm talking about by your last reaction. I have a question from Kim. Hey, Kim. Nice first name. Thank you. Could you share this slide? Oh, I'm going to do better than sharing this slide. I'm going to share with you the entire deck. So you just have to take your phones out. Now is the time. There's no NDA thing. Don't take pictures. Absolutely take pictures. You can download this deck right here and start planning your EUC process directly. We have a few more time. If you want me to tackle other topics on what we just covered, go back on a few slides or yield some times for you guys to be able to go to the next sessions.
Thank you, Kim. So we have a few minutes for some Q&A. So please feel free to use this opportunity to ask Kim any of your questions. And whilst we wait, please make sure you use the barcode to download the presentation, also to connect with Kim, as Kim is very active and very, very helpful. So if you do have a financial services project, you've got questions, Kim, are they okay to contact you?
Absolutely. On that link, you'll have a link to my LinkedIn profile directly. You can always contact me. Always a pleasure to help you. And if you're in Canada and working actively on a deal, just give me a ping and I'll make sure that you guys are successful on that.
Thank you.
So Sumit asked me, how does licensing work? Can they use Power Apps, perhaps User Dynamics? Well, again, Sumit, that's going to depend on how you look at this. If you look at large banks like the HSBCs, the Citi, and the other, we're talking about tens, if not hundreds of thousands of users. And if they are all part of the EUC process to declare, to manage, and everything, ultimately, we feel that the Power Platform will become as prevalent as Office 365. We have more and more clients today that their coverage with Power Apps per user is 100% of the workforce, just like they do with Office E3 or E5. I'm not going to say we have thousands of those clients, but we have hundreds of those clients today. And with companies between 50,000 to 400,000 employees, they all have a Power Platform premium licenses that will enable you to build a very sophisticated end-to-end EUC track, manage, and monitor process very effectively. Now, they don't need the Dynamics license unless you use Dynamics as the solution as one part of the EUC, just like a normal Dynamics license would work. And the way that the Dynamics and Power Platform licensing work today, they will have a Power Apps license for the EUC process and maybe a whole bunch of other things like return to work, vaccination, or other HR processes they have internally on top of their Dynamics license that allows them to use Dynamics, right? So the Dynamics license that are modern today, they can only give you access to the Power Apps that are part of your CRM process. But everything else that is outside of that, they need a Power Platform, Power Apps, Power Automate license to accomplish that. I have Rajiv asked me a question. Can you a bit more explain other than using graph? how the process identification works with some example if there's time. Of course, there's time, Rajiv. So you can have an assistant, you can have an executable on your PC, right? That you can distribute through your normal IT things, right? So that is great for everything that is not in the cloud, because the graph, well, it works in the cloud, but everything that happens on the computer doesn't necessarily work. So you can have a logger, and again, make sure that this complies to your data privacy officer and everything, but you can have this logger, this executable, that knows how many apps that you've opened in a day and what are those apps. So if you open Excel a lot, it doesn't know what's within the Excel spreadsheet, but it knows that you open Excel many times a day, and then you can use that as a prompt to send an information back to Power Platform and then ping back through Teams to say, hey, I see you use Excel a lot, you 27 times today or whatever. Are any of those Excel spreadsheet meet our definition of an EUC? This is one thing you could do. So when you still have lots of those Excel spreadsheets that live physically on a computer, that companion that is installed can actually monitor that and use a trigger to engage with that person retroactively and ask them to provide more information. There are other ways to look at what the Excel spreadsheet does. If it lives on premises or isolated in the desktop, you can have different types of, again, there's regulation in different countries that would allow or prevent that, but to use that to see what's happening on the screen and be able to detect with OCR the content of a specific spreadsheet, right? Without that spreadsheet being in the cloud, you can have some sort of robotic desktop automation or robotic process automation or other means to be able to read what's happening on the screen whenever an Excel spreadsheet is on, right? You don't need to go to TeamViewer and stuff like that. You can do that with RDA and RPA. There are certain areas where you won't be allowed to do it. Make sure that you consult your data privacy officer on that. But then if the file lives in the cloud, even if I open it locally through Excel or through Teams or whatever, if the file is stored on OneDrive, on SharePoint, then MIP will have an idea of what's in that information. Or you can use AI Builder or Azure Cognitive Services. Once it's in the cloud, there are multiple ways to be able to extract the information contained within the file without having to install anything on the desktop. And that can be done automatically. MIP is the obvious choice here. Rajiv, I hope that answers your question.
Okay, so we have a last couple of minutes, last chance to ask any questions you have. Before we hand over to Chris, Christine and Natalia for a Q&A and discussion before we move on to the Azure session. So 1 more minute left, last chance to ask any questions. Whilst we wait, I just want to once again thank you, Kim, for obviously being here today, supporting our community effort and sharing this insight to help us all, whether we're customers, partners, consultants, on navigating the world of financial services and delivering the projects effectively and in accordance with, obviously, with regulation. So once again, thank you. Thank you, Kim, and we look forward to seeing you next month at the Dataverse Summit. There is one final question I think you can see by Kumar's mentioning Kim. I will ping you in LinkedIn. Have more detailed questions on proposing Power Platform versus Dynamics for end clients.
Absolutely looking forward to it, Sumit. And there's always like a good licensing deck that a lot of people like. I'll put the link to it, aka.best/Power Platform deck. There's a lot of information on capabilities, licensing. I try to maintain that deck kind of updated every time. The last update is from August. So there's lots of information there, but absolutely you can ping me on LinkedIn and have a talk.
Well, thank you, Kim.
All right. Thanks, guys. Thanks, everyone, and enjoy the rest of the event.
Thank you. That was awesome. So thanks again, Kim. So that leaves us to Chris and Christine and Natalia. So Chris actually leads a Power Platform finance community